No one could stop the human princess once the war began. The trees shimmered in the morning light, their leaves reflecting colors she had never seen on Earth, the old home of humanity. The wind whispered gently through the branches, carrying the faint scent of flowers that bloomed only once every 10 years. Despite the beauty around her, Alara felt a weight pressing on her shoulders. Her planet, peaceful and quiet for centuries, had suddenly become a target. Humans were no longer the insignificant species that everyone thought they were. The Clethari Dominion, a vast empire that controlled many star systems, had begun sending scouts and warships near human space. They considered humans weak, easy to conquer, and not worth negotiating with. Alara, however, knew that humans had strengths no one else could understand, strengths born not from size, speed, or technology, but from creativity, courage, and persistence. Alara's mind worked like a machine. Even at 16, she had already outsmarted diplomats and generals twice her age. She knew that the Clethari did not expect humans to fight back. Many of her own people still hoped for peaceful negotiations, thinking war was impossible. But Alara had learned from the history books that underestimating humanity was always a mistake. She had begun to quietly organize teams, gather intelligence, and find ways to defend Arvesa without the Clethari ever suspecting her plans. As she watched the sunrise, she thought about her advisors. Most of them were careful, cautious, and respectful of tradition. They believed humans should negotiate, even when danger was clear. They reminded her of how easily humans could have been wiped out centuries ago. But Alara had learned that humans' greatest weapon was their mind. Where other species relied on machines and brute force, humans could invent solutions, improvise, and adapt to anything. And if war came, Alara intended to show the galaxy that humans were not fragile, they were formidable. Her attention shifted when a small hovercraft landed in the palace courtyard. The craft's engines hummed softly, barely disturbing the air. A messenger stepped out, bowing respectfully. "Your Highness, urgent news from the Galactic Council," he said, handing her a slim communication device. Alara activated it, and the hologram flickered to life. A representative from the Clethari Dominion appeared, tall and pale-skinned, with eyes that seemed too cold for anyone to look at comfortably. "Princess Alara of Arvesa," the voice said, smooth and commanding, "the Clethari Dominion requests your immediate attendance at a peace summit. Refusal will be interpreted as hostility." Alara studied the figure carefully. The Clethari always spoke this way, polite, even formal, yet every word carried a threat. She knew their fleets were powerful, their weapons advanced. But she also knew something they did not. Humans were unpredictable. They could turn even the most desperate situation into an advantage. She tilted her head slightly, hiding her thoughts behind a calm expression. "I will attend," she said softly, though the decision in her mind was already made. Attending did not mean surrendering. It meant learning, observing, and planning. The summit was held on a massive station orbiting a neutral star. Its halls gleamed with metal and glass, reflecting every movement and whisper. Alara walked through the corridors, accompanied by two human guards who matched her step for step. Many alien delegates were already present, their forms and shapes astonishing in variety. Some had 4 arms, some glided instead of walking, and others had skin that shimmered like liquid metal. They looked at Alara with curiosity, some with doubt. A human princess leading her species. How fragile she must be. When the Clethari representative greeted her, he bowed slightly, though the expression on his face was unreadable. "Princess, we are pleased you have come," he said, his tone smooth but filled with quiet menace. "Let us discuss the future of your people." Alara nodded politely, smiling in a way that did not reveal her mind racing 100 steps ahead. She listened as the Clethari spoke of trade, diplomacy, and mutual benefit. But she noticed subtle hints of their true intentions. fleets being moved closer to Arvessa, supply lines being disrupted, and whispers among other delegates that sounded like fear rather than hope. The Clethari were patient and clever. They wanted to test humanity, to see if the species would bend before them. She excused herself politely under the pretense of studying the star maps displayed in the central hall. No one followed, assuming she was simply being curious. Alone, she examined the projections of human space and the routes of the Clethari fleets. Every line, every ship, every weak point became part of a mental map. Humans had few resources, yes, but their ingenuity could compensate for every deficit. Alara considered each possibility, each tactic, until a plan began to take shape in her mind. Not one of surrender, but one of clever resistance. Suddenly, alarms rang through the station. Red lights flashed. Alara froze, then moved quickly to a control panel. Holographic screens displayed something that made her heart skip a beat. Clethari warships had surrounded the station. The peace summit was a trap. The delegates around her panicked, but Alara's mind worked faster than fear. She tapped commands, activating emergency protocols she had secretly installed months ago. Hidden escape routes opened, and human ships, small, nimble, and seemingly ordinary, prepared for immediate departure. As chaos erupted, Alara's calm presence anchored her people. "Follow my lead," she commanded, her voice steady. Her guards and attendants moved with precision, not because of force but because she inspired confidence. She guided her team to the hidden launch bay, where a fleet of civilian vessels had been retrofitted with defensive systems. The Clethari, expecting disorganized humans, were about to witness something unexpected. The escape was tense but controlled. Humans used the station's infrastructure to hide, warp, and confuse the Clethari. Ships that seemed fragile darted through tight passages, evading detection. Alara's heart raced, not from fear, but from exhilaration. Every human on board knew the odds, yet each of them moved with determination, following the princess who had always believed that humans could achieve the impossible. Once safely away from the immediate threat, Alara gathered her team. "The Clethari expected us to be afraid," she said, her eyes shining with determination. "But we are humans. We are clever, adaptable, and strong in ways they cannot imagine. This is only the beginning." Her words spread through the crew, igniting a spark of hope that no alien empire could easily extinguish. In the following days, she coordinated intelligence networks, shared tactics, and prepared humans for the possibility of conflict. She did not glorify war. She prepared her people to survive, to protect their homes, and to show the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated. Every plan she made was rooted in understanding, observation, and improvisation. She studied the Clethari patterns, learned their weaknesses, and crafted responses that no one could anticipate. The humans under her command began to change. Fear turned into focus. Doubt turned into creativity. Where others saw fragility, they discovered resilience. And in the center of it all stood Alara, a young princess whose courage and intelligence had begun to reshape not just her people, but the expectations of the galaxy. Alara looked up at the stars from the deck of her flagship, a small smile forming on her lips. She knew the Clethari would return. They always returned. But she was ready. Humans had something no other species could replicate: the power of the mind, the will to survive, and the spark of ingenuity that could turn even the direst circumstances into opportunity. And once the war began, no one could stop the human princess. The stars stretched endlessly outside the observation deck of Princess Alara's flagship. Each point of light was a reminder of how small human space seemed compared to the vast galaxy, yet each also held the promise of discovery and opportunity. The Clethari Dominion's fleets had withdrawn for now, but their shadow loomed ever closer. Alara knew that the war had truly begun, even if it had not yet touched every planet. Her people had survived the first test, but the real challenge was ahead. Alara moved among the crew, her presence steadying even the most anxious. Every human aboard looked to her not only as a princess, but as a strategist, a leader who could see possibilities where others saw only danger. "We are not here to fight blindly," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We are here to think, to adapt, and to outsmart anyone who underestimates us. That includes the Clethari." Her words carried through the corridors, lifting spirits that had been tense since the attack on the summit. The human ships were few in number compared to the Dominion's vast fleet. Most were civilian vessels hastily upgraded for defense and mobility, but that limitation became an advantage. The Clethari relied on predictable patterns, expecting humans to react slowly, to fear confrontation. Alara had other plans. She instructed engineers to modify engines for rapid bursts of speed and to install small sensors that could detect fleet movements at long distances. Scientists worked day and night to develop simple but clever devices. Drones that could mimic ships, holograms to confuse the enemy, and mapping systems that used environmental patterns to hide their fleet from sensors. Alara spent hours reviewing star charts, her mind tracing countless possibilities. She imagined every route the Clethari might take, every trap they might set, and every weakness that could be exploited. To her, the galaxy was not just a collection of planets and stars. It was a puzzle, one that required intelligence, creativity, and courage to solve. And humans, with their adaptability and imagination, were uniquely suited for such challenges. She called a meeting with her advisors, a diverse group of humans and sympathetic aliens who had joined their cause. "The Clethari will return," she said, spreading her hands over a holographic display of space routes and fleet positions. "We must be ready not with brute force but with ingenuity. Each of you knows your strengths. Now combine them. We will be faster, smarter, and more unpredictable than they can imagine." Her advisors looked uncertain at first, but Alara's confidence was contagious. They began proposing plans, small ideas that might seem insignificant alone, but together formed a network of strategies that could outmaneuver a much larger force. One scientist suggested using asteroid fields to hide ships while sending small drones to create false signals. Another proposed adaptive camouflage for their vessels that would blend with the stars. Each idea was examined, refined, and tested. Alara encouraged experimentation, reminding them that failure was only a step toward discovery. Meanwhile, the people of Arvesa were mobilizing in ways no one outside the human world had expected. Farmers and engineers, artists and students, all contributed to the effort. Some worked on building faster transport ships. Others created communication systems that could bypass enemy detection. Humans who had never held a tool for war before were learning to innovate, finding ways to turn ordinary objects into essential instruments of survival. Alara watched from afar, proud of her people. Their determination reminded her of stories from Earth, of explorers, inventors, and leaders who had achieved the impossible through ingenuity and collaboration. One evening, while reviewing sensor readings, Alara noticed unusual movement near a nearby star system. Clethari scouts were approaching, but their formation was rigid and predictable. She called her officers immediately. "They are coming, but they are slow to adapt," she said, pointing at the holographic map. "We will use that against them. Our ships will split into smaller groups. Each group will move unpredictably, creating patterns they cannot predict. We will not fight them directly. We will outsmart them." The operation required precise coordination. Each pilot received detailed instructions, yet they were also encouraged to use their intuition. Alara had always believed that human creativity could not be fully captured by orders or rules. "Think for yourselves," she told them. "Improvise when needed. Use your mind more than your weapons. The Clethari expect fear, hesitation, and conformity. We will give them none of those." As the human ships moved into position, The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The Clethari scouts entered the system, expecting to find easy prey. Instead, they encountered a series of confusing signals, decoy ships, and sudden disappearances. Human drones darted between asteroids, projecting false images of vessels where none existed. Sensors reported multiple ships where only a few were present. The Clethari commanders tried to adjust, but each correction led to another unexpected twist. Every attempt to capture or corner the humans failed. Alara watched the screens with a calm intensity. "Now," she said softly, signaling a coordinated maneuver. Human ships moved swiftly, weaving through the asteroid belts, while the decoys lured the Clethari into positions that made their sensors useless. It was not destruction that won the day, but creativity, quick thinking, and an understanding of patterns. The humans emerged from the engagement unscathed, their confidence strengthened. The victory, though small in scale, sent a clear message across the galaxy. Humans were not weak. They were clever, resourceful, and capable of turning disadvantage into opportunity. Alara knew that larger challenges lay ahead, but this triumph showed that her people were ready to face them. More importantly, it demonstrated that human ingenuity could challenge even the most disciplined and technologically advanced forces. In the days that followed, Alara focused on building alliances. Some alien species had been quietly oppressed by the Clethari, and they began to see humans in a new light. Alara met with representatives from these species, sharing ideas, offering support, and inspiring hope. She did not demand loyalty or obedience. She simply showed that humans could think, adapt, and act in ways no other species had anticipated. Her approach was subtle but powerful. By the time the Clethari returned, more than just humans were ready to resist. Training and preparation became a daily rhythm. Humans developed new methods of navigation, communication, and coordination that relied on intuition as much as technology. They practiced simulations, tested strategies, and learned to anticipate the enemy's moves. Alara herself participated in these exercises, leading teams and demonstrating techniques. Her presence was both inspiring and instructional. The humans began to realize that their species had always possessed untapped potential. The galaxy had assumed they were fragile, but under Alara's guidance, they were discovering their own strength. One night, Alara walked the deck alone, gazing at the stars. She thought of Earth, the ancient home of humanity, and of all the generations who had survived challenges and adapted to change. She understood that humans carried within them a legacy of resilience, creativity, and hope. The Clethari, with all their might, could not comprehend the depth of that legacy. They could predict patterns, count fleets, and analyze strategies, but they could not predict imagination, courage, or the will to survive. Her reflection was interrupted by a message from one of her scouts. A Clethari vessel had approached a nearby trade route, likely testing human defenses. Alara called her officers immediately. "We will observe first," she instructed. "We will learn from them before they even know we are watching. Prepare drones, decoys, and sensor networks. Every movement they make will teach us something new." She smiled faintly, feeling a thrill of anticipation. Observation, analysis, and creativity. These were weapons humans wielded naturally. And soon, the Clethari would discover that they had underestimated not just a princess, but an entire species. Over the following weeks, the humans began small, strategic operations. They disrupted supply lines, rerouted trade, and created confusion among Clethari patrols, all without ever firing a single destructive shot. It was not brute force that gave them advantage. It was intelligence, planning, and the unpredictable human spirit. The Clethari grew frustrated, unable to understand how such a small and seemingly vulnerable species could continuously avoid traps, confuse fleets, and maintain freedom of movement. Humans did not follow the rules of war the way other species did. They invented new rules as needed. Alara's leadership became legendary within her fleet. Crew members who had doubted themselves now trusted their instincts. They improvised in ways that often surprised even Alara, and she encouraged their creativity. "Every idea counts," she said. "No thought is too small." Humans survive not because of strength alone, but because of our ability to see possibilities no one else sees. The words became a mantra, spreading from ship to ship, fueling morale and determination. In one daring maneuver, humans used the gravitational pull of a nearby planet to slingshot small vessels around the Clethari fleet, appearing suddenly where the enemy least expected them. Sensors were tricked by decoys, communication signals were intercepted and rerouted, and every engagement ended without destruction, only with confusion and retreat. Humans laughed quietly among themselves at their own cleverness, taking pride in their creativity and foresight. Each success strengthened their confidence and proved that intelligence, not force, could win battles. Alara watched it all, calm and focused. She understood that the coming weeks would test her people even more, but she also knew something fundamental. Humans were not meant to be underestimated. Their minds were powerful weapons, and their hearts were capable of inspiring allies. Every maneuver, every plan, every clever trick was part of a larger purpose: to ensure humanity's survival and to show the galaxy that once humans decided to act, no force could predict or stop them. At the end of the cycle, Alara gathered her team in the observation room. The stars twinkled around them and human ships moved in quiet coordination across space. "We have proven something important," she said. "We are not powerless. We are humans, and that alone gives us strength. The Clethari may return in greater numbers, but they will never know all that we can do. They will always underestimate our creativity. And when the time comes, we will show them exactly what humans are capable of." Her officers nodded, inspired and ready. Even the youngest cadets felt a spark of determination they had never known. Under Princess Alara's guidance, humanity was awakening, discovering potential they had never imagined. The war was only beginning, but humans had already begun to prove their worth. They were clever, unpredictable, and resilient, qualities no empire could easily overcome. And in that moment, as stars stretched endlessly before them, Alara knew the truth. The galaxy would soon learn that humans were not fragile. They were remarkable. And once the war truly began, no one could stop them. The galaxy seemed quieter than usual, but Princess Alara knew better. The calm was only temporary. From the observation deck of her flagship, she watched the stars streak past as her fleet navigated through uncharted systems. Every light in the distance held a possibility: some neutral planets, others potential allies, and some, likely, spies of the Clethari Dominion. Nothing went unnoticed under her careful gaze. Humans were learning to move through the galaxy with a confidence no other species had expected, and Alara's mind was already 3 steps ahead of any potential threat. The success of their previous maneuvers had spread rapidly across human colonies. People who had once doubted their abilities now trained in improvisation and strategy. Scientists, engineers, and pilots shared knowledge across fleets, creating a network of intelligence and creativity unlike anything seen before. Alara often thought of this network as a living organism, each human acting as a neuron, passing information and adapting in real time. It was messy at times, chaotic even, but it was powerful. The Clethari might have numbers and technology, but humans had something they could not calculate: imagination. One morning, as Alara reviewed communications from scouts, a new opportunity appeared. A neutral star system, rich with rare materials, lay between human colonies and Clethari-controlled space. It had been untouched for centuries because it was difficult to navigate. Alara smiled. This was exactly the kind of challenge humans thrived on. Other species might avoid complexity, but humans found freedom in it. "Prepare a survey team," she instructed. "We will chart safe routes, set up supply stations, and create a path the Clethari will never anticipate." The team she selected was unusual by standard military logic. Scientists and engineers traveled with scouts and navigators. Each member was chosen not only for skill but for creativity and the ability to think differently. Alara knew that success often came from unexpected ideas. "Remember," she said before departure, "our strength is our mind. Observe, adapt, and use every advantage the galaxy offers. If we do this well, we will make a route that even the Clethari cannot predict." The journey to the new system was filled with small triumphs and lessons. Humans discovered natural phenomena in space: gravitational currents, magnetic fields, and asteroid clusters that could be used to hide ships or create illusions. Scouts reported back on potential hazards, and engineers developed solutions on the fly. Every problem became an opportunity to innovate. Alara encouraged experimentation, reminding the teams that failure was not shameful. It was simply the first step toward discovery. When they arrived at the star system, the humans faced their first real test of ingenuity. The system's orbit was irregular, with asteroids constantly shifting positions and unpredictable solar flares interfering with sensors. Other species might have avoided it entirely, but Alara saw it as a playground. She divided her team into smaller groups, each with a specific goal: mapping safe passages, constructing observation posts, and creating temporary shelters for ships. The operations required coordination, quick thinking, and constant adjustment. Alara herself moved among the groups, offering guidance and encouragement. She suggested clever solutions, like using reflective surfaces to create optical illusions, allowing small ships to appear as multiple larger vessels. She demonstrated how to adjust sensor readings to confuse potential intruders. Humans quickly learned to exploit every natural feature of the system to their advantage. By the time the first Clethari scouts arrived, they found a system that seemed impossible to navigate, filled with confusing signals, moving obstacles, and no clear targets. The humans had turned the difficulty of the environment into a shield. As the days passed, news arrived from nearby colonies. Some species that had suffered under the Clethari's expansion now reached out to Alara. They had observed human ingenuity and bravery and wanted to join efforts. Alara welcomed them, not as subjects or soldiers, but as collaborators. She recognized that humans' greatest strength was the ability to inspire cooperation and creativity, even across species boundaries. Together, humans and allies could create strategies and networks that no single empire could anticipate. Alara began coordinating the first multi-species exercises. Humans shared techniques for observation, improvisation, and deception. Allied species contributed knowledge of their environments, technologies, and communication systems. Alara's role was to connect these abilities into a coherent plan, using humans' natural creativity to guide them. It was challenging, often messy, and full of unexpected outcomes, but it worked. Every exercise revealed new ways to protect their colonies and outmaneuver the Clethari. One night, while reviewing sensor data, Alara noticed a pattern. The Clethari seemed frustrated, moving in ways that indicated confusion and hesitation. Their fleets were powerful but rigid, unable to adapt quickly to the unexpected. Alara smiled. This was exactly the advantage humans needed. "They think in patterns," she told her officers. "We think in possibilities. When the Clethari return, they will not know what to expect, and that uncertainty will be ours to use." Her officers nodded, understanding that intelligence and creativity were more effective than confrontation. Alara then focused on training her people in ways no other species had considered. She encouraged exercises in problem-solving, improvisation, and creative thinking. Humans were taught to see space itself as a tool, to use natural phenomena, to anticipate movement, and to develop strategies that went beyond conventional rules. They created simulations that tested adaptability, requiring teams to adjust plans mid-operation without guidance. This training built confidence and instinct, preparing humans for the unpredictable challenges of war. The impact of these efforts was soon apparent. In one clever maneuver, humans used a series of small, unmanned drones to create the illusion of multiple fleets moving through a star cluster. The Clethari, attempting to monitor the situation, misinterpreted the signals, believing a large human force was present where only a few ships existed. Scouts sent to investigate returned with inaccurate reports, further confusing the Dominion's strategy. Alara praised her teams for using ingenuity instead of force. "This is how humans win," she said. "We do not need to destroy to succeed. Our mind is our weapon, and our creativity is our shield." The humans' reputation began to grow across the galaxy. Word spread that humans were clever, adaptable, and unpredictable. Some species who had once seen humans as fragile now offered assistance and sought guidance. Humans became known not for their strength, but for their ingenuity, their ability to transform limitations into advantages. Alara's leadership had turned her species into a force that others respected, even feared, not for their violence but for their brilliance. Alara spent hours contemplating the next step. She knew the Clethari would not be defeated by clever maneuvers alone. Their return would be decisive, testing humans' ability to unite, innovate, and protect everything they had built. She began drafting a larger plan, connecting colonies, fleets, and allies into a network that could coordinate rapidly across vast distances. Humans would not simply react, they would anticipate, adapt, and surprise. Every system, every path, and every strategy was interconnected. Humans would turn unpredictability into a structured advantage. Meanwhile, her fleet conducted reconnaissance in systems that the Clethari might use to approach human colonies. Every movement was observed, every possibility mapped. Humans devised clever traps that did not rely on destruction, but on misdirection and confusion. They used communication networks to share observations instantly, creating a web of intelligence that allowed them to anticipate enemy moves. Even the smallest ship contributed, and every individual's creativity was valued. Alara's philosophy was clear. Humans thrived when they trusted their instincts and worked together, combining imagination with skill. As the days passed, humans began to implement larger operations, testing coordination and creativity on a broader scale. They mapped entire sectors using drones, predictive algorithms, and human intuition. They established supply lines that were invisible to outsiders and built decoy stations to mislead any fleet attempting to attack. Each success reinforced the idea that humans did not need to overpower the enemy. They needed only to be clever, adaptable, and united. During one exercise, a Clethari scouting party entered a nearby system, unaware of humans' preparations. The scouts detected signals suggesting multiple fleets were converging. They attempted to analyze patterns, but human improvisation had already created too many variables. The Clethari commanders hesitated, unable to determine whether the threat was real or an illusion. By the time they realized the human ships had moved to entirely different locations, it was too late. The Dominion's forces withdrew, frustrated and confused. Humans celebrated not because they had attacked, but because they had succeeded in outthinking a superior power. Alara watched her fleet grow more confident with each passing day. Humans no longer hesitated, and their ingenuity became instinctual. They navigated complex systems, solved unexpected problems, and adapted to circumstances faster than any other species could anticipate. The network she had built across colonies and fleets functioned as a single organism, with humans at its heart. Alara's guidance remained steady, but the humans themselves were now capable of acting independently, improvising and creating solutions without direct instruction. One evening, as the stars reflected across the observation deck, Alara stood silently, contemplating the galaxy ahead. She thought of Earth and humanity's long history of overcoming challenges, of explorers, inventors, and leaders who had turned adversity into opportunity. The Clethari Dominion might have thought humans were weak, predictable, and easily controlled. They had been wrong. Humans had demonstrated that their strength lay in their creativity, their intelligence, and their courage. And under Alara's guidance, they were becoming a force no empire could easily contain. The coming weeks promised even greater tests. The Clethari would return in force, determined to assert control and crush what they could not understand. But Alara knew humans were ready. They had learned to adapt, innovate, and cooperate in ways no other species could. They were not only surviving, they were thriving. And when the Clethari returned, they would find humans transformed, clever, resourceful, and united in a way that no technology could counter. Alara turned to her officers, her eyes bright with determination. "We have proven something important," she said. "Humans are not fragile. We are clever, adaptable, and capable of facing any challenge. The Clethari may return, but they will not know all we can do. They will never anticipate our creativity or our unity, and when they confront us again, we will show them what it truly means to be human." Her officers nodded, inspired and ready. Even the youngest cadets felt the spark of determination that had begun to spread across every fleet and colony. Humans were awakening, discovering abilities they had never imagined. The Clethari might control fleets, technology, and numbers, but humans controlled something far greater: imagination, strategy, and the will to overcome. And as Princess Alara gazed at the stars, she knew the truth. The war was not yet over, but humans were no longer the timid, fragile species the galaxy had assumed. They were remarkable, unstoppable in their creativity, and ready to face the challenges ahead. And when the decisive moment came, no one, not even the vast Clethari Dominion, would be able to predict what humans could accomplish. The galaxy had grown tense. Word of humans, cleverness, and unpredictability had spread across systems, reaching even the Clethari Dominion. For the first time, the vast empire hesitated. Their fleets were powerful, their technology unmatched, yet every encounter with humans had left them baffled. No Clethari commander could anticipate what the humans would do next. And at the center of it all stood Princess Alara, calm, confident, and ready to lead her people to an outcome the galaxy would never forget. Alara's fleet gathered at the edge of a neutral star cluster, a place humans had prepared carefully over the months. Hidden stations, decoy satellites, and subtle sensor networks created the illusion of a much larger force. Drones glided silently through space, projecting signals that suggested fleets in multiple directions at once. The Clethari would not know where the humans truly were. Alara smiled. Humans had learned to think like nature itself, fluid, adaptive, and impossible to fully predict. Her officers moved around her, reviewing data, adjusting positions, and coordinating communications. Even minor adjustments mattered. A tiny change in a ship's path or a drone signal could ripple across the cluster, confusing any observer. Alara trusted her people completely. Humans had practiced improvisation, strategy, and teamwork for months. Now, everything they had learned would come together. The first sign of the Clethari appeared not as a battle fleet, but as scouts. They entered the system cautiously, scanning and analyzing, trying to detect the true positions of the humans. But each sensor reading gave them contradictory data. Drones reflected signals to one location while ships moved to another. Asteroid fields were used to hide movement, while small craft simulated the presence of larger fleets. The Clethari scanners worked overtime, but humans had learned to exploit assumptions. Every predictable expectation was inverted, every pattern manipulated. Alara observed the movement on her control deck, noting how the Clethari adapted and misadapted. "They expect direct confrontation," she said softly, almost to herself. "They cannot imagine strategy without destruction. That is their weakness." She tapped a series of commands on her console, coordinating human and allied ships in real time. Humans had learned to act simultaneously as one organism, guided by instinct, training, and imagination. Even the smallest decision, like the movement of a scout ship, could create waves across the entire system. Days passed with careful observation and subtle maneuvers. The Clethari attempted to anticipate humans, sending fleets into predicted paths. Each time they found empty space, false signals, and small vessels cleverly disguised. Human engineers had developed holographic patterns that could mimic entire fleets, creating illusions that even advanced scanners could not differentiate. Clethari commanders grew frustrated, unable to distinguish reality from trickery. Alara, watching from her deck, allowed herself a small smile. Patience, she knew, was often the most powerful weapon. Meanwhile, Alara's human allies expanded their influence across nearby colonies. They established supply stations in secret locations, created communication networks undetectable to the Dominion, and trained local populations in observation and quick adaptation. Humans were no longer just surviving. They were shaping a network of intelligence that spanned multiple systems. Every planet they touched became a node in a web of innovation, connected by trust, creativity, and strategy. The turning point came when a Clethari fleet, larger than any seen before, moved through the sector. They sought to assert control and punish humans for their defiance. But humans were ready. Every ship, station, and drone had a role in the intricate plan Alara had devised. The fleet moved cautiously, attempting to detect the humans' true positions. Each time they thought they had located a ship, it vanished, or revealed itself somewhere else entirely. Human ingenuity had turned the entire cluster into a living puzzle, one that the Dominion could not solve. Alara coordinated her fleet with quiet intensity. "Split into subgroups," she instructed. "Create more patterns, more uncertainty. Remember what we've learned. They expect patterns, predictability. Give them neither. Move with the stars, hide in plain sight, and let the impossible become our shield." Her officers followed her commands without hesitation. Humans acted as one, yet each individual had freedom to improvise within the plan. The combination of strategy and instinct made them formidable. As the Clethari struggled to navigate the cluster, humans executed a series of maneuvers that were both subtle and brilliant. Drones shifted positions to mimic signals of reinforcement, causing Clethari ships to divert. Small vessels moved through gravitational currents, vanishing from sensors only to appear elsewhere. Even asteroid fields were used to bend light and radar, creating illusions of fleets where none existed. At every turn, humans demonstrated creativity, adaptability, and a deep understanding of patterns, something the Clethari had never faced before. Alara's mind worked like a conductor, coordinating thousands of individual decisions into a coherent symphony of movement. She guided her fleet, anticipating Clethari reactions, exploiting their reliance on predictability, and turning hesitation into advantage. The Dominion's fleet was powerful, yes, but it was rigid, unable to adapt to humans' unconventional thinking. Each misstep the Clethari made reinforced the humans' position, demonstrating that intelligence and imagination could surpass brute force. When the Clethari finally realized they had been outmaneuvered, they attempted a different approach, direct communication, hoping to intimidate humans into compliance. Alara did not flinch. She projected calm authority through the calm channels. "You may have numbers," she said, her voice steady, "but we have something you cannot understand, the ability to think, adapt, and imagine. Humans will never surrender because we create solutions, we inspire cooperation, and we see possibilities you cannot even conceive. You may control fleets, but we control ingenuity. The Dominion's commanders paused, realizing the truth in her words. The humans they had underestimated were not only clever but capable of orchestrating complex operations across multiple systems without detection. Every attempt to predict or corner them had failed. For the first time, the Clethari understood that humans were not a species to dismiss lightly. They were adaptable, unpredictable, and united by intelligence and creativity. Alara then used the final component of her plan. Hidden supply stations allowed humans to move quickly, silently, and in unexpected directions. They appeared where the Clethari least expected, using gravitational currents and optical illusions to confuse their scanners. Decoy signals suggested vast fleets in multiple locations, while the actual human vessels operated quietly elsewhere. By the time the Clethari realized the deception, it was too late to change their strategy. The humans' network of intelligence and ingenuity had achieved what raw power could not. In the aftermath, humans celebrated, not because they had destroyed enemies, but because they had outsmarted them. They had preserved life, protected their colonies, and demonstrated that strength could take many forms. Alara walked among her fleet, offering quiet encouragement, reminding everyone that creativity, observation, and collaboration were more important than any weapon. Humans were beginning to understand their own power, and the galaxy was beginning to take notice. Allied species expressed admiration and respect. They had observed humans in action, seen how a seemingly fragile species could outthink empires, and realized that cooperation with humans could bring benefits far beyond expectations. Alara welcomed them, building relationships based on trust, shared knowledge, and mutual respect. Together, humans and allies were no longer reactive. They were proactive, shaping the galaxy in ways that did not rely on destruction or fear. Alara also knew that humans' greatest victories were still ahead. The Clethari might return, but they would face a species that had learned to innovate constantly, to anticipate and adapt, and to operate as a single, intelligent organism. Humans had discovered strengths they had never imagined: observation, imagination, collaboration, and persistence. These were weapons no enemy could measure or contain. And under Alara's leadership, they would continue to grow stronger, not through conquest, but through creativity and unity. In the quiet moments, Alara reflected on the journey. From a fragile, underestimated species, humans had become innovators, strategists, and leaders across multiple systems. Her people had learned that fear could be transformed into focus, doubt into ingenuity, and limitations into opportunity. She thought of Earth, the long history of humanity, and all the generations who had survived challenges through intelligence and courage. Those traits were now the core of humanity's identity in the galaxy. Alara turned to her officers, her eyes shining with determination. "We have done more than survive," she said. "We have shown the galaxy that humans are not fragile. We are imaginative, adaptable, and capable of shaping our destiny. The Clethari may return, but they will never be able to predict everything we can achieve. They will learn, as all will, that humans are not a species to underestimate." Her words carried through the fleet, inspiring confidence, determination, and pride. Across the galaxy, humans began to build a reputation that could not be ignored. Stories of ingenuity, clever strategy, and collaboration spread to distant systems. Other species took note, not out of fear but out of respect. Humans were no longer seen as fragile or insignificant. They were admired for their creativity, their resilience, and their capacity to unite and innovate in the face of overwhelming odds. And at the center of this transformation stood Princess Alara. Not simply a leader, but a symbol of humanity's unique qualities: intelligence, adaptability, courage, and the relentless pursuit of possibility. She had guided her people through uncertainty, trained them to trust their instincts, and inspired them to act with confidence and imagination. Under her guidance, humans had proven that strength was not only measured in power or technology, but in thought, creativity, and the will to overcome. As Alara gazed out into the stars from her observation deck, she saw more than points of light. She saw opportunity, potential, and the endless horizon of possibility. Humans had begun to understand themselves, and in doing so, they had begun to shape the galaxy in ways no empire could fully anticipate. The Clethari Dominion had underestimated them once, and it would not happen again. Not because humans were violent, but because they were extraordinary in ways others could not predict. The war was not over, and the galaxy would continue to present challenges. But humans had learned a vital truth. Their creativity, intelligence, and unity were their greatest weapons. Under Princess Alara's guidance, they were unstoppable, not because of might, but because of ingenuity, adaptability, and the unyielding spirit that defined humanity. And when the next challenge came, the galaxy would witness the full force of human brilliance. And so, humans, once underestimated, now stood ready. Led by a princess who understood their true power, they were prepared to face whatever the galaxy could throw at them. They would survive, they would adapt, and they would thrive. And in the end, the universe would know the truth. No one could stop the human princess once the war began. No one could stop the human princess once the war began.